Welcome back to Econo Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman. We are talking banking liquidity and why is there such a high liquidity and it continues to accumulate.
It just grows.
It's just growing. It's just becoming bigger and bigger, larger and larger. So what can be the reason? Why is no one tapping in to take a few cents, if I may ask?
I like the way that you put it, Elsie, because it's part of the conundrum that is currently prevalent in the banking system. Remember, in the first part of our talk, I said, I do not know where the liquidity comes from, but I can make a few clever guesses based on what I see. So I can see the symptoms, but I don't know what's causing the disease. And very few people do, but it's not public knowledge. You know, it's not advertised where this liquidity suddenly comes from. So what happens now is that it's accumulating. So normally in a healthy economy, you would find if it is in an expanding phase, in other words, it's growing, it's a positive phase in the economy, your liquidity would inch upwards, but very incrementally, not by 1.7 billion in a month, which is what's currently happening, you know. Because the moment that it becomes available in the banking system as liquidity, it becomes credit or potential credit. So the bank is looking then for new customers or its existing clients to take up new loans. So this is not happening, and this is very easy to prove. Other than finding out where it comes from, it's very easy to say why it is accumulating, and you just look at private sector credit extension, that magic acronym PSCE that we've discussed in the past, and you can see that it is dismal, and there's no other word to describe it. The private sector, companies are not borrowing. Now, there can be many reasons for that, but ultimately I think it's a confidence thing. You know, if the people in charge of a company are not the managers, if they are not convinced that, I'm talking big companies here, if they are not convinced that whatever they borrow from the bank, they will be able to service that loan, pay it back, plus make a profit
from it
on the side, from taking up that loan and investing it and using it in a productive way. So business confidence is at an all-time low. Now you sit with this anomaly. Liquidity is at an all-time high. Record liquidity that we've never seen in the last 31 years. But business confidence very, very low, almost like what it was immediately after independence, you know. And the only thing that not the only thing, I think the most plausible explanation is that, remember, the recession started in 2016. But what I said last week is that you couldn't see it in the statistics because the statistics are delayed. They only become available a quarter or a semester or even a full year later, and if it is the national accounts, it's a year and a half that they are delayed. You know, and this is not something that anybody is doing wrong. It's just the nature of the way that you collect statistics or data and process it and produce statistics, you know. So there's always a lag. So you can't prove that there's a recession when it starts. You don't know. The banks very quickly, within 6 weeks or so, see that things are getting sluggish, but it still doesn't prove it's a recession. Now remember, I said in the sort of the middle of 2016, there's a big recession coming. Everybody said, you're talking nonsense. And I said, wag en kyk, wait and see. You will see it. And 8 months later, we were in the middle. Then it was proven by the statistics. We were in the middle of a recession. So the recessionary phase started towards the end of 2016, carried on 17, 18, 19, 2020, just when we were looking up, here arrives a nasty little virus called Corona, and we had COVID-19, the lockdowns and the big impact, and all the little advance that we made to get out of the 2016 slump was all basically obliterated overnight. Taken away completely by COVID-19. That carried on for 2020, 2021. It was only last year that you started seeing things are improving. The former finance minister, Mr. Kali Schletwein, he was very fond always of talking about green shoots. Now, for us, it's a very appropriate image because we live in a dry country and we know exactly after rain what is meant by green shoots coming out of the soil, but that also evaporated after COVID. So what you find in practice, in reality, is that many companies, small companies especially, but also medium-sized companies and bigger companies, they were in serious trouble. They had to make all sorts of plans to stay afloat. And many of the smaller companies did not make it. I mean, all the stories of companies that were around for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. They had to shut their doors. This was the reality of 7 years of recession exacerbated by COVID-19. And this gave a massive knock to business confidence. And that private sector credit extension is currently, I think the April figure was 3.4%.
Yes, it was 3.4%.
It must run there at 12%, 13%. To see the effect in the economy. What it shows to you is that there's money flowing into the system. That's the liquidity, but the available liquidity is not taken up by companies. The private sector is shunning the liquidity. They do not want to go and borrow. And I think one can understand it from this history that I've described. And we're all familiar with it. I mean, we've just lived through it. So the liquidity will not neutralize before private sector credit extension does not come up. And when it was about 7% in 2017, we thought it can't go any lower. And then by the beginning of 2021, I think PSCE was just above 1%, which is basically nothing. And I can guarantee you, if it is so small, you're talking about small loans, meaning that companies didn't borrow to invest, no big projects. They just borrow, usually on overdraft, to survive. And that had a major psychological effect. And now they're sitting back and they are asking themselves, is this all the promises that we hear of in the economy and that we see, is this for real? And put into the mix inflation, our overheads are getting more expensive every month because of inflation and because the Bank of Namibia is raising the interest rates all the time. So it's like putting a damper on economic expectations. And you see it reflected in the statistics when you see that the companies do not want to borrow, and you can speculate why, but from what I've said, I think it's fairly obvious. It basically means that the private sector does not trust the signals that are being sent to us, or that we see, that we pick up in the economy. They hanging back. They're very reluctant to commit themselves. They've just endured a lot of pain. They had to borrow money to survive. So, and I don't think it will change this year. I think we are too far into this year to make any big difference, although I'm positive that we will start seeing the beginning of a shift in sentiment But it'll take until next year before you start seeing it in the statistics.
Okay. We will quickly go for a short break, Mr. Daniel. Let's do that, and after we return, we will, of course, do our last talk before we say goodbye.